right, so today is kind of a fun stream because we are talking in depth about something that we've explored, or at least we've touched on in previous streams, which is the pedal steel dying? So I suppose we'll both share our opinions, Andrew, but maybe it would be best for us to start by kind of talking about a couple different elements. So, criteria. So, number one, is it out there just in the culture, in the music, being utilized presently? So that's one thing I'd like us to kind of go through. Another, which we were just talking about a second ago, is are people growing up and taking pedal steel lessons? And is it just happening in Austin and Nashville, or is it happening all over, or somewhere in between?
Yeah, in other words, are children starting out playing pedal steel?
Okay. Exactly. And there's some other things too, speaking to community and so on. But maybe let's start with that first one. What are your thoughts there, Andrew?
Well, I think
either of those, I should say.
Well, as far as our children taking pedal steel, I'm sure that there are some, but I think they are probably outliers. I think there's probably very few, because I haven't seen it. If you go to the pedal steel conventions, you don't see tons of young prodigies. Maybe one. One young person. So that's my guess. And we were talking. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Just briefly, I recently saw a video on YouTube where Travis Toy mentions that he did grow up playing it, but it's because his dad did, and so it's lessons. But I think that's kind of the exception to the rule. Whereas, and you had mentioned it, but back in the day, this evolved out of Hawaiian guitar, and there were Hawaiian guitar academies, and different instruments.
Paul Franklin talks about taking his Hawaiian teacher. He studied guitar with a woman that was Hawaiian guitarist.
So I don't see it as as deeply ingrained as like 6-string guitar lessons, where people can go down to like whatever, local music store or whatever and take lessons, because I don't think that it's there. Another element of is it dying?
Like if you would go to like a bluegrass camp and see all the young people, kind of coming up through that system, there's not something analogous to pedal steel, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. But I wouldn't say that in and of itself means that it's the instrument's dying or dead. And just to backtrack a little bit, you can go back to the pedal steel guitar shows in the 70s and watch videos online of DeWitt Scott saying this instrument's dying, and kind of taking this whole preservationist mindset about it. You read those old like back issues of Pedal Steel Guitar magazine, and it's the same thing. It's like really for the entirety. The timeline's kind of crazy, right? Because most of the pedal steel guitar's history now has been in like with this whole "this is a dying thing, let's preserve it" mindset. And if you think about like the development of the instrument, well, the 70s, like Emmons E9 was pretty new, relatively speaking. I mean, depending on how you're looking at it, right? And I would say to that end of like instrument development, you and I were talking about a video we watched this week of basically, and we'll do a different video on it, but that it was like a pedal steel guitar, a new pedal steel guitar that had pitch shifters for the strings and levers and pedals.
Electronic pitch shifters.
Exactly, right? And like that is definitely kind of a new thing. So Yes, that might be unique, and it might just be one person doing that. But the fact is, in terms of developing the instrument, it is still happening. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Andrew?
Well, yeah, I think something that you were kind of touching on is when the preservation mindset kind of came to the forefront, say in the late 70s, it's the instrument wasn't even done developing, and those two things don't really go together, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. And you could even say, you could make the case that the pedal steel's heyday was like in the 90s with all the stuff Paul Franklin and Bruce Boughton and others were doing. Now, I don't know that I'm making that case, but certainly pedal steel was all over country music at that point. And another footnote, I suppose here we're really speaking pretty strictly to country. Yes, in the past there was Buddy Emmons playing jazz and Curly Chalker, and it's been used in other contexts, as it is today. But really, kind of the bread and butter in terms of where this instrument is used is country music, and I don't, and related things like Western swing, right? And I don't think anyone is disputing that. So, one of the things that I did was kind of come up with a list of country musicians who are youngish and who are popular now, and started to look at if they're playing pedal steel. And some of those came out of, and Andrew, you'll have to help me remember the name of the guy whose video we were talking about. But do you remember his name, Andrew?
No, I don't. But here I have a picture of
Gotcha.
Grady Smith. That's who it is.
That's it. Yeah. Right. So, can you explain sort of the premise of this video, and we'll provide a link in the description to the video.
Well, I think he's simply saying that we're in the midst of a 90s country revival, that there's all these young artists that sound very similar to the music that was happening in the very tail end of the 80s going into the 90s. And along with that, a return to like pedal steel and telly and fiddle. I think that's his broader point.
Yeah. And so in that video, he mentions a number of artists, and I looked at them and then a few others, and I'm going to pull up my notes here. But, okay, so to start, and this is in no particular order, but Cody Johnson and Casey Musgraves, they're both on the younger side, they're both newer artists, and they both use pedal steel pretty heavily in their music. Now, I should preface this list by saying this research was done kind of quick, so it could very well be that there's a pedal steel guitarist that I name who is no longer playing with them or is playing with someone else, or is the touring guitarist, but it's someone else in the studio. So with that caveat, they both use, and I'll also say I'll probably butcher some pronunciations here, but Harrison Yount. Now, I've watched some of his videos online. Awesome player, and again, a young guy who probably we all should hate because he's awesome and can play the hell out of it, and seems to me like he's having a pretty fun career. Playing with those guys on TV and big stadiums and so on. So,
right, good for him.
Yeah. Cody Jenks is another, and this is a steel guitarist who I know less about. Austin Hot Rod Tripp. I really have only, only heard it in the context of Cody Jenks tunes. And this is one where, again, just due to lack of familiarity, I'm not sure if Austin is on the albums and touring or one or the other. But, another steel guitarist to check out, right? Jake Worthington, again, a newer, younger artist. Adam Goodale is the guitarist who I believe he uses. Jesse Daniels, another one. Pete Burak, Chris Stapleton, and Zach Top. both are huge. Chris Stapleton has been real. I think he may have even played a Super Bowl, if I'm remembering right. I might have that wrong, but point being, he's huge.
Right.
And Zach Top is a younger guy. He's actually one of the guys mentioned in the video we're talking about. He's in his 20s, and both of them have used Paul Franklin. And maybe we should talk about that for a second, because Paul Franklin, not to make this a Paul Franklin video, but Paul Franklin was the young guy back in those like 1980s pedal steel conventions. He was the young, scary virtuoso.
Right.
And then he, of course, and he was even recording in the 70s. So his career has withstood the test of time. And really the 90s is where he was on, everything, every record.
Yeah, that's what I think he really made his mark on pedal steel, was through all of, he was the #1 recording pedal steel player, so.
Yeah. But his career, it really has continued. I mean, even though perhaps from a public perception standpoint, the 90s is where he, as you said, sort of, became the guy. He was on records in that time between the 90s and present day, which definitely saw some, country music kind of changed post 9/11, and then there's the whole kind of pop country, bro country thing. Still, Paul Franklin was on a lot of those records. And now here we are, kind of on the other end of it, where the 90s sound has come back into style. And lo and behold, it's Paul Franklin on those same records with Zach Top and playing live with Chris Stapleton and all that. So it's kind of funny. And without taking a second large detour, I saw a description that was describing basically neo-traditional country, which is what a lot of the 90s country is, as basically a return to sort of honky-tonk, even outlaw country, but with basically like ballads and love songs in there too, in addition to just kind of the barroom stuff. Yeah. So I don't know that that's the be-all end-all, but just from a working definition of what is coming back in style in terms of this 90s stuff, maybe that can at least give us a little mileage. So let's see here. 3 more whose steel guitarists I'm not familiar with, and I just don't know who is on the records or playing with them live. Right. Brent Cobb, Jason Isbell, and Braxton Keith. But Charlie Crockett has a guy named Nathan Fleming, and one of my friends saw Charlie Crockett in St. Louis this month, and said that show was the best live concert he's ever seen. So pretty high praise from now this is just a casual listener, but someone who's heard a lot of music. Frankly, I mean, we've both talked about how good the pedal steel sounds on all those Charlie Crockett recordings. So. Right. Nathan Fleming seems to be someone to look out for. And I just have 3 more here. Sturgill Simpson, and this is another guitarist. He's from Eastern Europe, I believe, maybe Bosnia, but started on Telecaster with Sturgill Simpson and now plays pedal steel. Laur Jomens, and again, I'm positive I'm butchering that name, but it's the best I can do without having heard the name myself.
A valiant
before.
try.
Yeah, right? There we go. But also noteworthy in that this is someone who's clearly coming from literally from another place, right? Coming from Europe and getting interested in this and picking it up. And Sturgill plays some pretty compelling music. So,
right.
Let's just go down like an alternate reality path for a minute and say, all of the legends of pedal steel that died out, they never carried it on. It is possible for essentially, I think this whole preservationist thing, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, there's enough there already in terms of the pedal steel lexicon for people to come in and pick it up and play convincingly. Now, and I think probably that's what you and I did too, because we got steel, we learned music, then we got steel guitars and kind of tried to apply what we knew about music to those instruments. And I think we were actually pretty successful in doing it, although it was significantly harder of a learning curve than any other instrument I've had.
I would agree with that, yeah.
But to date, I've had a pedal steel guitar lesson, and it was with Doug, who your teacher, and you've taken some lessons. And I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about Doug and your experience with that, and how much you've studied pedal steel and all that?
Yeah, well, I was lucky to find Doug Stock, who is he's a very good pedal steel player, and I feel lucky that I got to work with him because he helped me out of some places that I was stuck, I think. That's something I wonder about with this. It's like you say, if all the players are gone and all we have is the recordings to listen to revive pedal steel from that, would that work or not? Maybe that's a topic we can visit another time, but
sure.
I think it would be much harder without running into being able to pick the brains of people like Doug, or but I don't know if that if I'm dragging our conversation away from where it needs to be, but.
No, I agree. Again, it's the question of is this instrument dying? Is this community dying?
Right.
And I don't think it is. And I think that it will essentially never be dead because those recordings have already withstood the test of time. And as long as there is pedagogy in music out there are people who can learn music. Yes, this is a very, very difficult instrument to get your head wrapped around and limbs and fingers wrapped around. But I think it's there. I think it's there to stay.
I do too, and I think things have changed. I think sometimes when people say, "Well, it's dying," it's really what they might be saying is there's fewer honky tonk gigs. You can't.
Yeah. That's a good point.
You can't do that anymore. And yes, that has died.
Sure.
Live music in a lot of ways has really taken some hits in the time I've been involved with it. But
yeah.
But there are other, what we're doing right now. You can, or the pedal steel conventions, or things are constantly
Sure.
changing. So
Yeah.
It's the metric by which you're judging the death of pedal steel is. It's worth consideration.
Perhaps relevant to that point is this whole 90s country revival right now, I think A, proves that those recordings withstood the test of time, and B, from the 90s on, I don't think the infrastructure in terms of lessons and so on that Paul Franklin and Buddy Emmons and whoever else enjoyed. It was gone, right? And so if a lot of these younger players have
the question
come up and are
where did they come from?
Yeah, because for all intents and purposes, a lot of them are as good, on recording or live as anyone, right? Yeah, and this is another thing we've talked about, but if you go back and listen to the Speedy West era steel guitarists or a guy like Curly Chalker, there's a significant level of virtuosity that transcends that which you typically heard on the 90s country. And that's not to say Paul Franklin wasn't as virtuosic. I think it's to say maybe the style changed, right? And some of the crazy sound effects that Speedy West did were crazy and virtuosic and may have fallen out of favor just with kind of the general audience. And so someone like Paul Franklin took an approach which I actually agree with, which is less is more on this instrument.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going off on a tangent here, but when I first got the steel guitar and was trying to learn it, I was trying to play all these lush 4, 5, 6 note kind of jazz chords. And you can do it, but it's such a dynamic instrument. And I mean literally in terms of frequency spectrum, harmonic, overtones, things like that, that like dyads and single notes sound great, and some triads. But if you're trying to play like a seventh chord, Curly Chalker could make it work. But maybe just like, listen to little Paul Franklin. He's playing some dyads, keeping it simple, and making it sound awesome. So
yeah, it's like Curly Chalker versus Lloyd Green.
Yeah. That's a great way of putting it.
And I think Paul Franklin explored the Lloyd Green avenue. The apple fell from that tree in some ways.
Yeah. I just have two more. Another newer guy, Randall King, uses a pedal steel player named Bobby Terry. And then the last one, which I think also is noteworthy here, is Luke Bryan, who kind of came, I don't listen to Luke Bryan's music as much, came up in that, post 9/11 and really aughts and teens time period where the country, like what was popular in country music had shifted, at least away from like that kind of that 90s neo-traditional, and now whatever we're calling today 90s neo-revivalist or whatever sound, the neo-traditionalists.
Post-neo country. I'll work on it.
There we go. But Luke Bryan has Travis Toy playing with him live, and I think on recordings too. So even in like the country era that is least associated with kind of pedal steel, I suppose, unless we're talking about like Nashville sound, string orchestra era or something, like steel's still there. So really, and it never went away, even in that like, Nashville sound, pop or countrypolitan, or it's still there. Point being, it's always been there. And it's here today, and it's here today in every style of country that is being played. And country itself, people are literally making videos about how it is back, how it's bigger than ever, and so on. So, in short, is it dying? Is it dead? Is it over?
My vote is no. I think it's.
Yeah.
I think it's a hard thing to kill.
Yeah.
Because
likewise, obviously, I agree.
It's such a part of the sound.
Yeah.
And country music always looks back to its roots, and it's just a part of it.
So I agree 100%. But the other part of it for me is that I think it hasn't hit its ceiling yet. I think I mean, certainly we have this history, and we've been talking about, the 90s and Paul Franklin being this heyday, and so on, and, the 60s being a big time for the pedal steel.
Right.
But I believe that there's another level out there in terms of what can be done on this, and what will be done on it, and its popularity, and so on. So, and I think some of it, hopefully, like one of the goals of our channel is to just kind of talk about it and foster a community of steel guitarists and enthusiasts and players and so on. But I do think that we will see its continued use in kind of these traditional ways, as well as maybe some new innovative ways or different genres and so on.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that some of the, like back to the pedagogical side, I think that there's more to be done there too. Like I think that there can be more and better resources, even though there are some good ones out there, but for learning the instrument. And I think, I was talking with DeWitt Scott Jr. This was now probably 10 years ago, and he made the point that this is really like kind of one of the newest American instruments. And it really is still an instrument that, yes, has kind of been codified in two plus-ish ways, E9 and C6. We're still seeing that, the digital, tune-o-matic or whatever, pedal steel being developed. So it is an instrument that yes, has reached some stasis, but I would say isn't completely codified yet in terms of copedant, tuning, all that stuff. So I think it's very much alive and vibrant as far as instruments go and communities go, and I think in a sense it's primed to to really explode.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Yeah.
there's high times ahead for the pedal steel.
Yeah. Well, great, short and sweet today, but I guess we'll leave it at that. And
all right, so good news for everybody. The pedal steel lives.
Yeah, yeah. For those of us joining us, if you guys can give us a like and a follow, that would help the pedal steel, flourish and so on, and help us out. So be sure to do that. And yeah, I think that's about it. We have a couple other streams coming in through the pipeline. One, we're going to kind of review the Buddy Emmons book. A couple others. We're going to talk about why it's the hardest instrument, why it's the easiest instrument. So keep your eyes peeled, and we'll be back soon.
Yeah, we hope you join us, and until next time, we'll see you later.